Mia's heart was pounding before she even reached the sand. Her phone had just buzzed with a message from her landlord about a broken pipe. Her coffee had spilled on her only clean shirt, and now she needed 10 quiet minutes before her whole morning fell apart. The beach was the only place she trusted to calm her down. She walked fast, her sandals slapping against the wooden path, her sunglasses hiding eyes that had barely slept. She found her usual spot near the rocks, dropped her bag, and pulled out a paperback book she had read 3 times already. She was not really reading it, she was trying to breathe. That was when she noticed him, a man in a gray shirt, maybe 30 years old, walking slowly along the shoreline like he owned the whole beach. He stopped near her, closer than strangers usually stood, and looked at her for a moment too long. Mia felt her whole body tense. She had dealt with enough uninvited attention in her life to know exactly what a lingering stare meant, and she was in no mood for it today. She lowered her sunglasses just enough to look him straight in the eyes. "Eyes are up here," she snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut through the sound of the waves. The man blinked, clearly caught off guard, but instead of looking embarrassed, a slow smile spread across his face. He crossed his arms and tilted his head, studying her like she had just told a joke instead of a warning. "Actually," he said, "I was looking at the sunburn on your nose. You might want to fix that before it turns into a real problem." Mia opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out right away. She had expected an apology, or maybe some awkward denial. She had not expected humor. She glanced down instinctively at her arms, checking for sunburn that did not exist, and when she looked back up, the man was already smirking, clearly proud of catching her off guard. "You're lying," she said, though a small laugh slipped out despite her best effort to stay serious. "Maybe," he admitted, "or maybe you're just easy to tease. Either way, I'm Daniel. I just moved into the neighborhood, and this seemed like a good spot to figure out if I made the right decision." Mia crossed her arms, still guarded but no longer angry. There was something about the way he spoke, calm and unbothered, that made her curiosity win over her irritation. "Mia," she said finally, "and for the record, this beach gets crowded by noon. If you wanted peace and quiet, you picked the wrong hour." "Good thing I'm not looking for quiet," he replied. "Quiet is boring." She almost smiled again, but stopped herself. She was not here to make friends with strange men who stared too long, no matter how clever their comebacks were. She picked her book back up, signaling the conversation was over, though her eyes kept drifting toward the edge of the page instead of the words on it. Daniel did not push further. He simply nodded, said it was nice meeting her, and continued his walk down the shore, leaving small footprints in the wet sand. Mia watched him for a few seconds longer than she intended, before forcing herself to look away. She told herself it did not matter. Strangers came and went at this beach all the time. Tourists, joggers, people walking their dogs. He was just another face she would probably never see again. She spent the next 20 minutes trying to convince herself of that, failing every time her mind wandered back to his smirk. By the time she packed up her things and headed home, the tension from her morning had melted into something else entirely, something she could not quite name. She walked the familiar path back to her street, her mind replaying the exchange more times than she wanted to admit. When she turned the corner onto her street, she noticed a moving truck parked outside the house next to hers, the one that had been empty for months. Boxes were stacked near the front porch, and a familiar gray shirt was draped over one of them, drying in the sun. Her stomach dropped. She stood frozen on the sidewalk, staring at the house, praying it was a coincidence, praying the universe had a better sense of humor than this. But then the front door opened, and Daniel stepped out, carrying another box, looking just as surprised to see her standing there. "You have got to be kidding me," Mia muttered under her breath. Daniel set the box down slowly, his smirk returning even wider than before. "Small world, neighbor," he said. Mia stood there, torn between disbelief and something dangerously close to amusement, unsure whether her quiet morning had just gotten a lot more complicated or a lot more interesting. For the first few days, Mia tried her best to avoid Daniel entirely. She left for work earlier than usual, took the long way around the block, and made sure her curtains stayed shut whenever she heard movement outside. It was not that she disliked him, it was that she did not trust the strange flutter in her chest every time she thought about their conversation on the beach. She had built her life around careful boundaries, and something about Daniel made those boundaries feel harder to hold on to. but avoiding a next-door neighbor in a small coastal street was nearly impossible. On the fourth morning, Mia stepped outside to grab the newspaper and found Daniel kneeling by the fence between their yards, trying to coax a stray orange cat out from under a bush with a piece of dried fish. "Please tell me that is not your cat," Mia said, crossing her arms. Daniel looked up, unbothered by the sudden accusation. "Nope. This little guy has been living under my porch for 2 days. I think he likes the shade." Mia stepped closer, curiosity slowly winning over her earlier plan to avoid him completely. The cat peeked out from the bush, sniffed the fish, then retreated again, clearly not convinced. "You're doing it wrong," she said. "You have to place the food farther away first, then slowly move closer. Cats don't trust people who rush things." Daniel raised an eyebrow, amused. "Sounds like you're speaking from experience." Mia rolled her eyes, but crouched down anyway, taking the fish from his hand without asking. She placed it a few steps away from the bush, then sat back on her heels and waited. Within a minute, the cat crept out, grabbed the food, and disappeared behind the fence. "See?" she said, standing up and brushing sand off her knees. "Patience." Daniel watched her with a look that was somewhere between amusement and genuine interest. "Noted. I'll remember that the next time I need to convince someone stubborn to trust me." Mia caught the double meaning immediately and narrowed her eyes, though she could not quite stop the small smile tugging at her lips. "Careful, neighbor. I bite harder than that cat." "I'll take my chances," he said. That small exchange became the crack that slowly opened the door between them. Over the following weeks, their interactions grew more frequent, though never planned. She would see him watering the small garden he had started, and he would ask her opinion on which plants would survive the salty coastal air. She would catch him jogging in the early morning, and he would slow his pace just enough to walk beside her toward the coffee shop at the corner of their street. One evening, as the sun began setting behind the hills, Mia found herself sitting on her porch steps with a cup of tea when Daniel wandered over, holding 2 folding chairs. "Figured we could watch the sunset properly," he said, setting one chair beside her. Mia hesitated only for a second before waving him over. "Fine, but only because the view is better with company. Don't get used to it." They sat together in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sky shift through shades of orange and pink. It was Daniel who finally broke the quiet. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Why were you so quick to snap at me that day on the beach? I mean, I get that I was staring, but there was something else in your voice. Something heavier than just annoyance." Mia's fingers tightened slightly around her cup. She was not used to people noticing things like that, let alone asking about them so directly. She could have brushed it off with a joke, the way she usually did, but something about the calmness in his voice made her want to answer honestly instead. "I've had bad experiences," she said quietly. "Men who thought staring, or worse, was some kind of compliment. After a while, you stop giving people the benefit of the doubt. You just assume the worst, and protect yourself first." Daniel nodded slowly, not interrupting, letting her finish. "So when you stared at me like that," she continued, "my first instinct wasn't curiosity. It was defense. I didn't know you yet. I just saw another man who thought it was okay to look without asking." "I'm sorry that happened to you," Daniel said, his voice steady and sincere. "And for what it's worth, I wasn't trying to make you uncomfortable. I really was looking at your sunburn. I just didn't expect you to snap back with that much fire. Honestly, it was kind of refreshing." Mia let out a short laugh despite herself. "Refreshing. That's one way to describe almost getting yelled at by a stranger." "Better than boring," he said with a shrug. "I told you already, I don't like boring." She studied him for a moment, searching his face for any sign of dishonesty, any hint of the pattern she had learned to recognize in men who said the right things, but meant something else entirely. She found none, just quiet sincerity, and maybe a little bit of nervousness hidden behind his usual confidence. "Your turn," she said. "Why did you move here? People don't just randomly relocate to a small coastal town without a reason." Daniel exhaled slowly, looking out toward the horizon instead of at her. "I needed a change. My old job was draining me. My old apartment felt like a box I was slowly suffocating in. And honestly, I think I just needed to prove to myself that I could start over somewhere new. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere I didn't know a single soul." "And how's that going so far?" she asked. "Better than expected," he said, glancing at her with a small smile. I met an interesting neighbor on my very first morning here. That has to count for something. Mia shook her head, trying to hide the warmth spreading through her chest at his words. You're impossible. Maybe, he said, but you're still sitting here talking to me, so I can't be that bad. As the days turned into weeks, their friendship deepened in small, quiet ways. They shared dinners on the porch, takeout containers spread between them as they talked about everything from childhood memories to embarrassing first jobs. Mia learned that Daniel had once worked as a lifeguard during college, which explained his comfort around water and his tendency to notice small details, like sunburns on strangers' noses. Daniel learned that Mia had grown up moving from city to city with her parents, never quite settling anywhere long enough to call it home, until she found this small coastal street. One afternoon, while helping Daniel unpack the last of his moving boxes, Mia came across an old photograph tucked between some books. It showed a younger Daniel standing beside a woman with dark curly hair, both of them laughing at something outside the frame. "Who's this?" she asked, holding up the photo before she could stop herself. Daniel glanced over, his expression shifting slightly. "That's Grace. We dated for a couple of years back in the city. It ended a while ago. Not badly, just, we wanted different things." Mia nodded, setting the photo down carefully, trying not to let her mind spiral into unnecessary questions. "It's okay. You don't have to explain." "I want to, though," Daniel said, surprising her. "I don't want there to be any confusion about where I stand, especially with you." The directness of his words caught her off guard, and for a moment, neither of them said anything. The air between them felt charged, heavier than usual, filled with something neither had said out loud yet. Mia cleared her throat, trying to steady herself. "And where exactly do you stand?" she asked, her voice quieter than she intended. Daniel took a step closer, his eyes steady on hers, closer than I expected to be after just a few weeks, and honestly, a little scared about how much that surprises me. Mia's heart raced, caught between the instinct to retreat and the growing desire to stay exactly where she was. She had spent so long building walls to protect herself that she almost did not recognize the feeling of wanting to lower them. "I'm scared too," she admitted softly, "but not in the way I used to be." Daniel reached out, gently tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch light and careful, as if he understood exactly how fragile the moment was. "We don't have to rush anything," he said. "I just wanted you to know how I feel." Mia nodded, her chest tight with an emotion she had not allowed herself to feel in a long time. "Thank you for telling me," she whispered. They stood there for a while longer, the unfinished boxes forgotten around them, the quiet hum of the evening settling comfortably between them. For the first time in years, Mia felt something she had almost forgotten was possible. She felt safe. But safety, she would soon learn, could be more fragile than it seemed, especially when old rumors and misplaced trust found their way into a story that was only just beginning to feel real. Autumn arrived slowly along the coast, painting the edges of the town in soft golden light. The tourists who had filled the beach all summer began to thin out, leaving quieter mornings and cooler evenings behind. For Mia, the change in season matched something shifting inside her. She found herself looking forward to small things again, things she had stopped noticing years ago. The sound of Daniel's footsteps on the porch, the smell of coffee drifting from his kitchen window, the easy rhythm of two lives slowly folding into one another without either of them forcing it. One Saturday morning, Daniel knocked on her door holding two bicycles, one clearly borrowed from a neighbor down the street. "I thought we could explore the coastal trail today," he said. "I hear there's a lighthouse about 5 miles out. Figured it was time we did something other than sit on your porch talking about our childhoods." Mia raised an eyebrow, though she was already grabbing her jacket. "Are you saying our porch conversations are getting boring, Daniel?" "Never boring," he said, wheeling the bike toward her. "Just ready for an upgrade." They spent the entire day riding along the coastal path, stopping occasionally to admire the view or catch their breath after a steep climb. The lighthouse, when they finally reached it, stood tall and weathered against the bright afternoon sky, its white paint chipped from years of salt and wind. They sat on the rocks nearby, sharing a small bag of snacks they had packed that morning, watching boats drift lazily across the water. "I used to think lighthouses were kind of sad," Mia said, breaking a comfortable silence. "Standing alone out here, warning ships away, instead of welcoming them in." Daniel considered that for a moment. I always thought of it differently. It's not pushing anyone away, it's guiding them somewhere safer. Sometimes the warning is the kindest thing you can offer. Mia glanced at him, surprised by the thoughtfulness in his answer. That's a really nice way of looking at it. I have my moments, he said with a small grin, though his eyes held something more sincere beneath the humor. As the sun began to dip lower, casting long shadows across the rocks, Daniel reached over and gently took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. Mia did not pull away. Instead, she let herself lean into the moment, feeling the warmth of his hand against hers, the steady rhythm of the waves below them, the quiet certainty that this, whatever it was becoming, felt right. Their relationship deepened gradually after that day, built not on dramatic gestures, but on small, consistent moments. Daniel started leaving little notes on her porch before heading to work, simple things like reminders to eat breakfast, or jokes about the stray cat, which they had eventually named Biscuit after adopting him together. Mia, in turn, began saving a seat for him at the small cafe where she worked part-time, always making sure his coffee order was ready, before he even asked. Their friends noticed the change before either of them fully admitted it out loud. Mia's closest friend, Lucy, who lived 2 streets over, teased her relentlessly whenever Daniel's name came up in conversation. "You light up every time you talk about him," Lucy said one afternoon as they walked along the boardwalk, sharing a bag of roasted peanuts. "It's honestly kind of ridiculous how obvious it is." Mia rolled her eyes, though she could not hide the small smile pulling at her lips. "We're just friends, Lucy." "Sure," Lucy said, unconvinced. "Friends who ride bicycles to lighthouses and hold hands while watching sunsets. Very platonic." Mia opened her mouth to argue, then closed it again, realizing she had no real defense. "Okay, fine. Maybe it's more than friendship, but it's new, and I don't want to overthink it and ruin something good." Lucy squeezed her arm gently. "Just be careful, but don't be too careful. You deserve something real, Mia. You've spent so long protecting yourself that sometimes I worry you forget to actually let people in." Her words stuck with Mia long after their walk ended, echoing quietly in the back of her mind as she watched Daniel through her kitchen window later that evening, laughing at something on his phone while sitting on his porch steps. She thought about all the walls she had built over the years, each one carefully constructed to keep her safe from disappointment. And yet somehow, this man next door had managed to find the cracks in those walls without even trying. That same week, Daniel invited Mia to a small gathering at his coworker's house, a casual dinner, meant to introduce him to a few new people in town, since he had recently started working at a local architecture firm. Mia agreed, curious to see him in a different environment, surrounded by new colleagues instead of the familiar quiet of their street. The house was warm and lively, filled with easy laughter and the smell of grilled food. Daniel introduced her proudly to his coworkers, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back as they moved through the crowd. Mia felt a flicker of pride at the gesture, a quiet acknowledgement that whatever they were building together was becoming something real, something worth showing to others. It was there that she met Oliver, one of Daniel's new coworkers, a tall man with an easy smile and an even easier way of making conversation. He seemed friendly enough at first, asking Mia about her work at the cafe and complimenting her on how well she seemed to fit into the neighborhood already. "You're good for him, you know," Oliver said at one point, gesturing toward Daniel, who was across the room laughing with another colleague. "He seems different since he moved here. Happier." Mia smiled, genuinely touched by the comment. "That's nice to hear. He's been really good for me too." Oliver nodded, taking a slow sip of his drink before continuing, his tone shifting just slightly. "Just be careful, all right? I don't want to overstep, but Daniel has a bit of a reputation from his old job. Great guy, don't get me wrong, but he wasn't exactly known for sticking around when things got serious. A few people back at his old firm could tell you stories." The comment landed like a small stone dropped into still water, sending quiet ripples through Mia's chest. She forced a polite smile, unsure how to respond, unsure whether Oliver was simply making conversation or genuinely trying to warn her about something real. "I appreciate you telling me," she said carefully, though her mind was already spinning with questions she did not know how to ask. She glanced at Daniel throughout the night, watching him interact so easily with everyone around him, wondering how much of what she thought she knew about him was actually true. On the drive home, Daniel reached over and took her hand, the same way he had done at the lighthouse weeks earlier. "Tonight was fun," he said. "Thank you for coming with me. It meant a lot having you there." Mia forced a smile, nodding along, though the warmth she usually felt at his touch was tangled now with a quiet unease she could not quite shake. "Of course," she said softly. "I had a good time too." But as they pulled into their familiar street, the porch lights glowing softly in the darkness, Mia could not stop replaying Oliver's words in her mind. A bit of a reputation, not known for sticking around. She wanted to believe it meant nothing, that it was just idle gossip from someone who did not know Daniel the way she was beginning to. But the seed of doubt had already been planted, and no matter how much she tried to push it aside, she could feel it slowly beginning to grow roots. That night, long after Daniel had said goodnight and returned to his own house, Mia lay awake staring at her ceiling, her mind caught in a storm of questions she was not ready to ask out loud. She thought about every wall she had built over the years, every lesson she had learned the hard way about trusting people too quickly, and for the first time since meeting Daniel, she felt those old walls beginning to rise again, brick by careful brick, even as a quieter part of her whispered that maybe, just maybe, this time could be different. She did not know yet how much that single conversation at the party would come to shape the weeks ahead, how a few careless words from someone she barely knew could shake the foundation of something she had only just begun to trust. All she knew, lying there in the darkness, was that the comfortable certainty she had felt with Daniel just hours earlier now felt fragile, uncertain, and dangerously close to slipping away. In the days that followed the dinner party, Mia found herself pulling away in small, quiet ways that Daniel could not help but notice. She stopped saving him a seat at the cafe. Her replies to his texts became shorter, delayed, wrapped in polite distance instead of the easy warmth they had grown used to sharing. When he knocked on her door one evening with takeout from her favorite restaurant, she thanked him politely, ate quickly, and found reasons to end the evening earlier than usual. Daniel noticed the shift almost immediately, though he could not understand what had caused it. He replayed their recent interactions over and over, searching for some mistake he might have made, some careless word that had wounded her without his realizing it, but nothing came to mind. As far as he knew, the night at his coworker's house had gone well, better than well, actually. He had felt closer to her that night than ever before. "Is everything okay?" he finally asked one evening, catching her on the porch before she could retreat inside. "You've been distant lately. Did I do something wrong?" Mia hesitated, her fingers tightening around the strap of her bag. "Everything's fine," she said, though her voice lacked its usual conviction. "I've just been busy. Work has been a lot lately." Daniel studied her carefully, unconvinced by her explanation, but unwilling to push too hard. "Okay," he said slowly. "Just know that if something's bothering you, you can talk to me. I'd rather know than guess." Mia nodded, offering a small smile that did not quite reach her eyes, before disappearing inside her house, leaving Daniel standing alone on the porch, more confused than ever. The distance between them continued to grow over the following days. Mia buried herself in work, picking up extra shifts at the cafe, using every excuse she could find to avoid long conversations with Daniel. She told herself she was being cautious, protecting herself the way she always had, but a quieter part of her recognized the familiar pattern of running before she could get hurt, of pulling away before someone else had the chance to leave first. Lucy noticed the change too, cornering Mia one afternoon at the cafe during a rare quiet moment between customers. "All right? Spill it," Lucy said, leaning against the counter with her arms crossed. "You've been weird all week. What happened with Daniel?" Mia sighed, setting down the cup she had been wiping clean. "Someone at his work told me he has a reputation for not sticking around when things get serious. That he's done this before, with other people." Lucy frowned, clearly skeptical. "And you believed them just like that? Based on what, exactly? Some guy you met for 5 minutes at a party?" "When you put it that way, it sounds ridiculous," Mia admitted, rubbing her temples. "But it's not just that. It's the fear underneath it. What if it's true? What if I let myself fall for him and he decides one day that I'm not worth sticking around for either?" Lucy's expression softened, and she reached across the counter to squeeze Mia's hand gently. "Or what if it's not true at all, and you spend the next few weeks pushing away the first good thing that's happened to you in years, all because of secondhand gossip from someone who barely knows him?" Mia did not have an answer for that. She simply stared down at the counter, torn between the fear that had shaped so much of her life and the quiet hope that Daniel had somehow managed to slip past her defenses, despite every instinct telling her to be careful. That evening, as Mia walked home from the cafe, she noticed Daniel loading boxes into his car, the trunk already half full of neatly packed belongings. Her stomach dropped instantly, old fears rushing to the surface before she could stop them. "What's going on?" she asked, approaching cautiously. Are you leaving?" Daniel turned, surprised by the sudden question, then glanced back at the boxes with a small, tired laugh. "Not leaving town, if that's what you're thinking. My sister is moving into a new apartment across the city, and I promised to help her move some furniture this weekend. I'm driving over there tonight to get a head start." Relief and embarrassment flooded through Mia at the same time, her cheeks flushing as she realized how quickly her mind had jumped to the worst possible conclusion. "Right, of course. Sorry. I don't know why I assumed that." Daniel studied her for a long moment, something clicking into place behind his eyes. "Mia, is this about what happened at the party? Did Oliver say something to you?" Mia froze, caught off guard by how directly he had guessed the truth. "How did you know?" "Because Oliver has a habit of oversharing old office gossip, especially after a couple of drinks," Daniel said, setting down the box he was holding with a heavy sigh. "What exactly did he tell you?" Mia hesitated, then finally repeated Oliver's words as accurately as she could remember them, watching Daniel's expression shift from confusion to quiet frustration as she spoke. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, clearly working to keep his voice calm. "Okay, let me actually explain what happened at my old job, because I have a feeling the story got twisted somewhere along the way. There was someone I dated briefly before I moved here. It ended because she wanted to move to another country for work, and I wasn't ready to leave everything behind at the time. It wasn't about me running away from something serious. It was about two people wanting different things at the wrong time. Somehow, in the world of office gossip, that got turned into me being someone who doesn't stick around." Mia felt a wave of guilt wash over her, mixed with relief at hearing the full story, instead of the fragmented version she had been carrying around for days. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I should have just asked you directly instead of letting it eat away at me like that." Daniel's expression softened, though there was still a trace of hurt in his voice. "I wish you had. I know you've been through things that made trust difficult, Mia, and I understand that. But if we're going to build something real, I need you to come to me first, even when it's uncomfortable. Especially when it's uncomfortable." "You're right," Mia admitted, stepping closer. "I got scared, and instead of talking to you, I pulled away and let old fears make my decisions for me. That's not fair to you, and it's not fair to whatever this is between us either." Daniel reached out, gently taking her hand the way he had done so many times before, though this time there was a seriousness in his touch that had not been there in earlier moments. "I'm not going anywhere, Mia, not because someone else expects me to stay, but because I want to. That's a decision I get to make every single day, and I'm making it now, standing right here with you." Mia felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, though they were not tears of sadness. They were the release of tension she had been carrying since the party, the quiet relief of realizing that her fears, while understandable, had almost cost her something she genuinely wanted to protect. "I don't want to keep running every time something scares me," she said softly. "I want to try, really try, even when it's hard." Daniel pulled her into a gentle embrace, resting his chin lightly on top of her head. "Then let's try together," he said. "No more assumptions, no more disappearing acts. Just us, figuring this out as we go." They stood there for a long while in the quiet evening air, the weight of the past few days slowly lifting between them. Mia knew the fear would not disappear overnight, that old patterns rarely vanished simply because one honest conversation had cleared the air. But standing there in Daniel's arms, she felt something she had not felt in a long time. She felt understood, chosen, and safe enough to keep trying, even when trying felt frightening. As Daniel finally pulled away to finish loading his car for the trip to his sister's apartment, he glanced back at her one last time. "Same time tomorrow?" he asked. "Sunset on the porch, like always?" Mia smiled, the first real smile she had allowed herself in days. "Wouldn't miss it," she said. And as she watched him drive away into the evening light, Mia realized that whatever fear still lingered inside her, it was no longer strong enough to outweigh the quiet certainty growing steadily in her chest. For the first time in years, She was choosing to stay instead of preparing to run, and that choice, however small it seemed, felt like the bravest thing she had done in a long time. Winter arrived quietly along the coast, turning the mornings crisp and the evenings early, but it did nothing to slow the steady rhythm that had settled between Mia and Daniel. Their relationship had grown stronger since the night of the misunderstanding. Built now on a foundation of honesty neither of them was willing to abandon again. They had learned to ask instead of assume, to speak up instead of retreat, and slowly, that simple shift had changed everything about the way they moved through life together. Then, on a cold morning in early December, everything shifted again, though this time the challenge came from somewhere neither of them expected. Mia received a phone call from her mother, who lived several states away and rarely called outside of holidays. Her mother's voice was tight with worry as she explained that Mia's grandmother had suffered a fall and was currently in the hospital, her condition serious enough that the family needed to gather as soon as possible. Mia's hands trembled as she hung up the phone, her mind spinning with fear and the sudden, overwhelming need to be there. Daniel found her 20 minutes later, sitting on the porch steps with a half-packed suitcase beside her, her eyes red from crying. "What happened?" he asked, immediately sitting down beside her and wrapping an arm around her shoulders. Mia explained through unsteady breaths, and Daniel listened carefully, offering quiet reassurance instead of empty promises. Without hesitation, he stood and disappeared into his own house, returning minutes later with his own bag packed and car keys in hand. "I'm driving you," he said simply. "Daniel, you don't have to do that. It's a long drive. And you have work," Mia protested weakly, though the relief in her voice betrayed how much she wanted him there. "I want to," he said firmly. "You shouldn't be alone right now, and I'm not about to let you drive 6 hours upset and exhausted. Work can wait. This can't." The drive to the hospital stretched long into the night, the two of them mostly quiet, Mia staring out the window at the passing darkness, while Daniel kept one hand steady on the wheel and the other resting reassuringly on her knee whenever the silence grew too heavy. When they finally arrived, Mia's family greeted Daniel with warm, if slightly surprised, gratitude, quickly folding him into the anxious energy filling the hospital waiting room. Over the following days, as Mia's grandmother slowly began to recover, Daniel remained by her side, running errands for tired family members, bringing coffee to exhausted relatives, and simply being present in the quiet, steady way that had become so familiar to Mia over the past few months. It was during one of those long hospital nights, sitting together in uncomfortable plastic chairs while the rest of the family slept in nearby rooms, that Mia turned to him with something she had been holding in her chest for weeks. "I used to think love was something that eventually let you down," she said quietly. "Every time I got close to trusting someone, something happened to prove me right. I built my whole life around expecting people to leave eventually." Daniel took her hand gently, waiting for her to continue. "But watching you these past few days," she went on, her voice thick with emotion, "driving me here without hesitation, staying up all night in these terrible chairs, being kind to my exhausted family even when they barely know you. I don't think I'm scared anymore. Not the way I used to be." Daniel lifted her hand and pressed a soft kiss against her knuckles. "I told you already, Mia. I'm not going anywhere. Not when things are easy, and definitely not when things get hard. This is exactly when it matters most." Mia's grandmother recovered steadily over the following week, and by the time Mia and Daniel finally made the long drive back home, something between them had shifted permanently, settled into place with a certainty that no longer needed careful examination. The fear that had once controlled so much of Mia's decisions had quietly loosened its grip, replaced by a steady trust she had never quite believed she was capable of feeling again. Spring returned to the coast a few months later, bringing warmer mornings and the familiar sound of waves rolling steadily against the shore. On a particularly clear Saturday, Daniel suggested they visit the beach together, the same stretch of sand where they had first met almost a year earlier. Mia laughed as they walked toward the shoreline, memories of that first encounter flooding back easily. "Remember when you tried to convince me you were staring at a sunburn instead of just staring?" she teased, nudging him playfully with her shoulder. "In my defense, you did have a little redness on your nose that day," Daniel said, grinning. "Sure you did," she replied, rolling her eyes affectionately. They settled onto a blanket near the same rocks where Mia used to sit alone with her books, watching the waves roll gently toward the shore. Daniel grew quieter than usual, and Mia glanced over, noticing the slight nervousness in his expression that seemed out of place on such a calm afternoon. "Everything okay?" she asked. Daniel nodded, though his hands fidgeted slightly with something in his jacket pocket. "Actually, there's something I wanted to ask you. Somewhere out here, since this is where everything started." Mia's heart began to race as she watched him shift, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a small velvet box, his earlier nervousness giving way to quiet, steady certainty. "I know we've only known each other a year," he began, "but I've never been more sure of anything in my life. You taught me what it means to earn someone's trust slowly, patiently, the right way, and I don't want to spend another year, or another day, without making sure you know exactly where I stand." Mia's hands flew to her mouth, tears gathering instantly as Daniel opened the box, revealing a simple, elegant ring that caught the afternoon sunlight. "Mia, will you marry me?" he asked softly. For a moment, Mia could not find any words at all, overwhelmed by the flood of emotion rushing through her. She thought about the woman she had been a year earlier, guarded and quick to snap at strangers, convinced that trust was something to protect rather than offer freely. She thought about how far she had come since then, one small, honest moment at a time, until fear had slowly given way to something far stronger. "Yes," she finally whispered, then louder, laughing through her tears. "Yes, absolutely yes." Daniel slid the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into a tight embrace, as the waves continued their steady rhythm behind them, indifferent to the significance of the moment, yet somehow perfectly fitting as the backdrop to it. Passers-by nearby smiled at the scene unfolding before them, a few even pausing to offer quiet congratulations, as Mia held her hand out to admire the ring glinting in the sunlight. Later that evening, as they sat together on their shared porch, the same porch where so many quiet conversations had slowly built the foundation of everything they now shared, Mia leaned her head against Daniel's shoulder, watching the stars begin to appear over the coastline. "Best day?" she asked softly. "Best day so far," Daniel corrected with a smile, wrapping his arm around her. "There are a lot more coming." Mia smiled into the quiet evening, thinking back to that first sharp comment on the beach, the confident smirk that had followed, and the small, unexpected friendship that had grown into something she had once believed was impossible for her. What began as an awkward encounter beneath the summer sun had slowly become the steadiest, safest thing in her life, proving that sometimes the most meaningful stories begin with the most unexpected first impressions and grow into something far greater than either person could have imagined standing on that beach a year before.